All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a government shutdown that really created two completely different realities. On one side, you had millions of Americans facing some serious uncertainty. And on the other, well, the White House, where the focus seemed to be on something else entirely.
So, to really get what was going on here, you've got to see it as a tale of two crises, playing out on two totally different and, frankly, conflicting tracks.
And right here, this is the core of the whole thing. I mean, on one hand, there's this massive public anxiety about essential services, like food stamps. And on the other hand, the president is talking about a bathroom renovation at the White House. This contrast, it's so stark, and it really sets the stage for the entire conflict we're going to unpack.
You know, as this thing dragged on, getting close to a record length, the impact wasn't just some headline in Washington. No, this was a real crisis for millions of people. We're talking about unpaid federal workers, crazy airport delays, and families genuinely worried about how they were going to buy groceries.
Okay, so what was the actual political fight that brought everything to a grinding halt? Let's break down the core disagreement that created this whole logjam.
What's super interesting here is how it all boils down to this. Republicans were basically pushing to just keep the lights on, pass the simple short-term funding bill. But the Democrats, they saw this as their chance to negotiate on other big priorities. And it wasn't just about healthcare money. It was also a real power struggle over whether the president could just freeze funds that Congress had already approved.
Now you have to hear this quote. This was from weeks before the shutdown even started. The president basically signaled the strategy of, "We don't need them," suggesting a belief that negotiating with the other party wasn't even on the table. That mindset really kind of framed the whole impasse that came next.
And this was the official line coming from the White House during the crisis. From their point of view, the blame was crystal clear. They saw it as a hostage situation created by Democrats and said no other policy talks could even happen until a clean funding bill was passed.
So you've got both sides pointing fingers, completely locked in this blame game. The big question then becomes, who did the American public actually hold responsible for all this?
The president, for his part, was consistent and very direct. This is the Democrats' fault, period. The solution, in his eyes, was simple. They just needed to cave. But when you actually look at the polling, you see a completely different picture. According to this poll, more registered voters, a solid 46%, were blaming the president and Republicans. That's compared to 37% blaming Democrats. And this gap between the White House's story and what the public thought was about to cause some major problems within the president's own party. Right, so that gap between the White House message and public opinion, well, it started to create some serious friction inside the Republican Party itself.
You started hearing comments just like this one from Republican Senator Jim Justice. It's basically a public call for leadership, a plea from someone in his own party for the president to step in and actually negotiate a way out of what he called an 18-carat food fight.
And this really shows you the disconnect we're talking about. While you have members of his own party in Congress publicly asking for more direct leadership, the White House was staying non-committal, refusing to say if the president was going to change his strategy.
This quote from strategist Matthew Bartlett just hits the nail on the head. He's suggesting that both parties were so focused on the political damage they thought they were doing to each other, they completely missed the fact that the real victim of the whole thing was the American public.
So where did all this leave us? Well, basically stuck. With both sides dug in, public frustration just growing, the whole crisis was trapped in this web of blame and political math, with no clear way out. It got to the point where even the humanitarian crisis around food stamps became just another political football. Republicans blamed Democrats for holding up the funding, while Democrats fired back, arguing that the administration had emergency funds it could use to protect those benefits, but just wouldn't. So check this out, because when the president did finally address a key sticking point like healthcare, his focus seemed to shift almost immediately. He acknowledged the problem, saying, and then in the very next breath, he just pivoted directly to his evening plans for a Halloween party. That remark, made while the whole shutdown crisis was still happening, became this powerful symbol of the huge disconnect between the urgency everyone else was feeling and the president's own priorities. Which leaves us with this really fundamental question. When the government is shut down, whose job is it to fix it? Is it the president's? Congress's? Does it fall on whoever has the most political leverage? It's a huge question about leadership and how government is supposed to work, and it's just as relevant today as it was then.